You hear it before you see it. A distant roar, like the earth itself is breathing. The air turns heavy. Mist curls into your skin. And then, without warning, the world opens. You're standing at the edge of something so vast, so powerful, it doesn't feel real. Welcome to Iguazu Falls, a place where nature doesn't whisper, it thunders. Long before you ever arrive here, before planes cross continents and cameras capture perfect angles, this place already had a story, one that feels less like history and more like a legend carved into water and stone. You step back in time. Before borders, before maps, before names, this land belonged to the Guarani people. And they didn't just see waterfalls here, they saw a story of love, rage, and gods. They spoke of a young woman named Naipe. Beautiful. Untouchable. Promised to a god named Mboy, a serpent deity who ruled the rivers. But Naipe had a different plan. She fell in love with a warrior named Taroba. And one night, under the cover of darkness, they fled together in a canoe, escaping down the river. But gods don't forgive betrayal. Mboy rose from the depths, furious. The river twisted. The earth cracked open. And in one violent moment, the river collapsed into itself, creating the massive, endless cascade you now see. The lovers. Torn apart. Naipe turned into one of the rocks below the falls. Taroba became a palm tree, rooted at the edge, forever watching, forever reaching, never touching. And the falls. Eternal. Furious. Alive. You stand there now, realizing you're not just looking at water. You're looking at a myth still unfolding. Centuries pass. The roar remains. In 1541, a Spanish explorer named Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca became one of the first Europeans to witness this place. He called it Saltos de Santa Maria. But even he knew the name didn't matter. Nothing you call this place could ever contain it. For years, it stayed wild. Untouched. Hidden deep within jungle so thick, it felt like the earth was protecting its secret. And maybe it was. Because this isn't just a waterfall. It's a system. A network. Over 275 individual cascades stretching nearly 3 kilometers wide. It doesn't drop in one clean line like Niagara Falls. It fractures. Splits. Multiplies. Like the river itself can't decide how to fall. And at its heart lies something darker, more intense. The devil's throat. Even the name feels like a warning. Now imagine this. You're there. You step onto a narrow walkway. Metal beneath your feet. Jungle pressing in on both sides. The air is thick, wet, almost electric. You hear the water before you see it, louder now, closer, like thunder that never ends. Each step forward, the sound grows. You grip the railing. Your heartbeat syncs with the roar. And then, it appears. A massive, gaping chasm where the river simply disappears. Water crashes down into a void so deep, you can't see the bottom. Mist explodes upward, swallowing everything in white. This is the devil's throat. And you're standing right above it. The ground vibrates beneath your feet. The spray hits your face, cold, relentless. You try to speak, but your voice is lost instantly, devoured by the sound. It's not just loud. It's overwhelming. You're not observing nature here. You're inside it. Every drop of water feels alive. Every gust of wind feels intentional. You realize something strange, something almost unsettling. You feel small. Not in a bad way. In a real way. You walk further. The falls stretch endlessly around you. Some narrow and elegant, slipping down smooth rock. Others explode outward, crashing in chaotic bursts. Rainbows appear and disappear in the mist, like fleeting illusions. You don't chase them. You just let them happen. Because here, nothing waits for you. Everything moves. Everything flows. You step onto another platform, closer to the base. Now the water surrounds you. It's louder. Stronger. The mist soaks your clothes. Your hair clings to your face. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because there's nothing else to do. You're drenched. You're overwhelmed. And you love it. You take a boat ride. Yes, you go closer. Closer than feels safe. The engine hums beneath you as the boat cuts through the river. The guide shouts something, but you barely hear it. Everyone around you grips the sides. Nervous laughter. Anticipation. And then, the boat charges straight into the falls. Not near them. Into them. Water crashes down like a wall. You can't see. You can't breathe for a second. It's chaos. Pure, wild chaos. And then it's over. You emerge soaked, gasping, laughing uncontrollably. Because you just did something insane. And you do it again. But beyond the beauty, beyond the adrenaline, there are things you don't expect. Did you know that during certain times of the year, the falls can nearly dry up? It sounds impossible. But when drought hits, what was once a roaring giant becomes a quiet skeleton of rock and trickling streams. It's rare, but it happens. And when it does, it reminds you of something important. Even giants have fragile moments. Then there's the wildlife. You think you're here just for the water? Think again. The surrounding rainforest, part of the Iguazu National Park and Iguazu National Park, is alive with creatures that feel straight out of a documentary. Colorful toucans glide overhead. Coatis, small, raccoon-like animals, wander near your feet, curious and bold. Butterflies swarm in hundreds, sometimes landing on you like living confetti. But don't get too comfortable. This jungle is real. And real jungles have rules. Here's something else most people don't tell you. You will get wet. Not a little wet. Completely soaked. Even if you try to stay dry. Even if you avoid the boat. The mist finds you. It clings to you. It's part of the experience whether you want it or not. So you stop resisting. And you embrace it. Now let's talk about the truth. Because not everything here is perfect. Yes, it's breathtaking. Yes, it's unforgettable. But it's also crowded. Very crowded. Thousands of people visit every day. Platforms fill up. Lines form. The quiet, cinematic moment you imagined. Sometimes, you have to fight for it. And then there's the cost. Flights to Argentina or Brazil aren't cheap. Park fees, transportation, guides, it adds up. And if you're not careful, you can easily overspend on things that don't actually enhance your experience. Then there's the heat. It's intense. Humid. Sticky. Draining. You'll sweat. A lot. And if you're not prepared, with water, sunscreen, patience, it can turn magical moments into exhausting ones. But here's the thing. None of that erases what this place is. Because even in the middle of a crowd, even under the burning sun, even after a long, tiring walk, you look up. You see the falls. And everything else fades. There's a moment that stays with you. It's not the biggest waterfall. Not the loudest. Not even the most famous viewpoint. It's quieter. You find a spot slightly away from the main path. Fewer people. Just the sound of water and wind. You stand there, watching the endless flow. And something shifts. You stop thinking about photos. About plans. About what's next. You just stand there. Present. Because places like this don't ask for your attention. They demand your presence. You realize something else too. This isn't just a destination. It's a reminder. A reminder of how powerful nature is. How small your problems can feel. How alive the world really is, beyond screens, beyond noise, beyond routine. And maybe that's why people travel across the world to stand here. Not just to see it, but to feel it. As the sun begins to set, the light changes. Golden hues stretch across the water. The mist glows. The roar softens, not in sound, but in how it feels. You take one last look. One last breath. Because you know something now that you didn't before. You didn't just visit Iguazu Falls. You experienced it. And experiences like this don't fade. They stay. In the quiet moments. In the memories you replay. In the way you see the world afterward. Because somewhere out there, beyond the noise of everyday life, there's still a place where the earth cracks open, where water falls like the sky is collapsing, where legends are carved into stone. And for a brief moment in your life, you stood at the edge of it. And even after you leave, it doesn't leave you. Days later, maybe weeks, you're somewhere ordinary. A street. A room. A quiet moment between conversations. And suddenly, you hear it again. Not the actual sound, but the memory of it. That endless, rolling thunder of water collapsing into itself. It lingers in your mind like a distant echo. Because once you've stood at Iguazu Falls, silence never feels the same again. You start replaying moments. Not the obvious ones, the big viewpoints, the crowded platforms, the photos everyone takes. No. It's the smaller details that come back to you. The way the mist caught the sunlight just right, forming a rainbow that vanished the moment you noticed it. The feeling of your shoes slipping slightly on wet metal walkways. The laughter of strangers turning into shared disbelief. The moment you locked eyes with someone else, both of you thinking the same thing without saying a word. How is this real? And then there's the sound of the jungle at night. Because most people think the falls are the main event. But the truth? They never really stop. Even when you leave the park, even when you're miles away in your hotel, you can still hear them. Faint. Distant. But constant. Like a heartbeat beneath the earth. And when darkness falls, the jungle begins to speak in its own language. Insects hum in layered rhythms. Birds call out in strange, unfamiliar tones. Leaves rustle without warning. Every sound feels amplified, like the world is alive in ways you're not used to. You lie there, listening. And for a moment, you feel something rare. Disconnected from everything you know. And connected to everything that matters. But let's go deeper. Because there's something about this place that most people don't talk about. It changes your sense of scale. Not just physically. Emotionally. You start questioning things. Why do we rush so much? Why do we fill our lives with noise, deadlines, distractions? Standing in front of something as ancient and powerful as this, those things feel distant. Almost irrelevant. You realize that the water flowing over those cliffs has been doing so for thousands of years. Long before you were here. Long after you're gone. And somehow, that thought doesn't scare you. It frees you. You think about the borders. Because technically, you stood between two countries, Argentina and Brazil. Two nations. Two languages. Two cultures. But the water. It doesn't care. It flows where it wants. It crashes where it must. No passports. No permissions. Just movement. Just force. Just nature being exactly what it is. And maybe that's another reason this place feels so powerful. Because it reminds you that some things are bigger than the lines we draw. You remember the people. Travelers from everywhere. Different accents. Different stories. Different reasons for being there. Some came for adventure. Some came for beauty. Some came because it had always been on their list. And some didn't even know why they came. But standing there, all of you shared the same reaction. Silence. A rare, collective silence. Because sometimes, words just aren't enough. You think about the effort it took to get there. The long flights. The planning. The uncertainty. Was it worth it? You already know the answer. But here's the honest truth most people won't tell you. Places like this don't always hit you instantly. Sometimes, you expect a life-changing moment, and instead, you just feel overwhelmed. Tired. Sweaty. Surrounded by people. And you wonder, is this it? But then, later, when the noise fades, when you're alone with your thoughts, that's when it hits you. Not as a sudden explosion, but as a slow, deep realization that you witnessed something extraordinary. And it quietly changed you. You start noticing things differently after. Rain doesn't feel like an inconvenience anymore. It reminds you of that mist. That endless cascade. You find yourself pausing more. Looking longer. listening deeper. Because you've seen what happens when nature is given space to be itself. And it's unforgettable. There's also a strange sense of gratitude that creeps in. Not just for the place, but for the moment. Because you realize how rare it is to stand somewhere that makes you feel completely present. No past. No future. Just now. And in a world that constantly pulls your attention in every direction. That kind of moment is priceless. But let's not romanticize everything. Because even beauty like this comes with responsibility. The ecosystem around the falls is fragile. Tourism brings awareness, but it also brings pressure. More visitors mean more infrastructure, more waste, more impact. And while the parks, Iguazu National Park and Iguazu National Park, do an incredible job protecting the area, the balance is delicate. So when you go there, you don't just experience it. You become part of its story. The question is, what kind of impact do you leave behind? And then there's time. Because no matter how long you stay, it never feels like enough. You could spend hours watching the same cascade, and it would still feel new. Still feel alive. Because the water is never the same. Not for a second. Every moment is different. Every drop is new. And that's the paradox of Iguazu. It's constant. And yet, it's always changing. On your last day, you hesitate. You walk slower. You take longer pauses. You look back more than you need to. Because leaving feels wrong. Like walking away from something unfinished. But maybe that's the point. Maybe places like this aren't meant to feel complete. Maybe they're meant to stay with you. Unfinished. Open. Alive in your memory. You take one final look. The roar continues. Unbothered. Unchanged. As if your presence meant nothing. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it meaningful. Because the world doesn't stop for you. But every once in a while, it lets you witness something incredible. So you leave. You carry your bags. You board your flight. You return to your life. But something is different now. Subtle. Quiet. But real. Because somewhere deep inside you, there's still a river flowing. Still a roar echoing. Still a memory of standing at the edge of something vast and uncontrollable. And whenever life feels overwhelming, whenever things feel too loud, too fast, too complicated, you close your eyes, and you go back. Back to the mist. Back to the thunder. Back to that moment where nothing else mattered. Because in the end, it was never just about seeing a waterfall. It was about feeling something bigger than yourself. Something timeless. Something real. And long after the water has fallen, long after the mist has faded from your skin, one truth remains. You didn't just visit a place. You stood at the edge of power. And for a moment, you understood what it means to truly feel alive. And maybe that's where the real story begins. Not at the falls, but after. Because when you return to your world, the schedules, the screens, the endless notifications, you start noticing something uncomfortable. Everything feels smaller. Not less important. Just less powerful. You sit in traffic, and instead of frustration, there's a strange calm. You remember standing above the devil's throat, where thousands of tons of water crashed every second without pause, without hesitation. And you think, if nature can move like that, why do I feel stuck? You begin to question the pace of your life. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But in quiet moments. You remember how the water didn't rush. It didn't hesitate either. It simply flowed. Endlessly. Effortlessly. And you wonder, what would happen if you lived like that? The memory sharpens over time. Details you didn't notice before begin to surface. The exact shade of green in the jungle. The way sunlight filtered through layers of mist. The smell, a mix of wet earth, river, and something ancient. It wasn't just a place. It was a feeling. And now, that feeling follows you. You find yourself telling people about it. But the words never feel enough. You say, it's beautiful. You say, it's massive. You say, you have to see it. But inside, you know. Those words barely scratch the surface. Because how do you explain something that isn't just seen, but felt in your bones? Some people will understand. Others won't. And that's okay. Because Iguazu isn't meant to be fully explained. It's meant to be experienced. You think back to the first moment you heard it. That distant roar. At the time, it felt like anticipation. Now, it feels like a symbol. A reminder that something powerful can exist just out of sight. Waiting. Building. Growing louder the closer you get. Maybe that's true for life too. Maybe the things that matter most aren't obvious at first. Maybe they start as whispers. And only reveal their true force when you move closer. You start craving more moments like that. Not necessarily bigger. Not more dramatic. Just real. Moments where you feel present. Moments where you're not thinking about the next thing. Moments where you're fully there. And that's the quiet impact of Iguazu Falls. It doesn't demand change. It inspires it. Slowly. Naturally. Like water shaping rock over time. You realize something else too. You didn't control anything there. Not the water. Not the weather. Not the crowds. And yet, it was perfect. In its own chaotic, unpredictable way. That's a hard lesson to bring back. Because your world thrives on control. Plans. Schedules. Expectations. But Iguazu doesn't follow plans. It exists beyond them. And for a brief moment. So did you. There's also a kind of humility that stays with you. You stood in front of something so vast, so unstoppable, and you couldn't change it, influence it, or even fully comprehend it. And instead of feeling powerless, you felt free. Because maybe not everything needs to be controlled. Maybe some things are meant to be witnessed. Felt. Respected. You begin to look at nature differently. Not as something separate from you, but as something you're part of. The same forces that shape those falls, time, pressure, movement, they exist in your life too. Just in quieter ways. Growth. Change. Transformation. They don't always happen in dramatic bursts. Sometimes, they happen slowly. Drop by drop. Day by day. Until one day, everything looks different. And that's when it hits you. The falls aren't just a place. They're a metaphor. For persistence. For power. For letting go. You remember how the water never holds back. It doesn't pause at the edge. It doesn't question the fall. It just goes. Fully. Completely. Without fear. And maybe that's the lesson you carry with you. To move forward. To trust the flow. To embrace the unknown. Because standing at that edge, you realized something important. The fall isn't the end. It's part of the journey. And suddenly, things that once felt uncertain don't feel so intimidating anymore. Because you've seen what happens when something lets go completely. It becomes something extraordinary. You don't need to go back to Iguazu Falls to remember that. It's already with you. In the way you think. In the way you see the world. In the quiet confidence that maybe, just maybe, you're capable of more than you realized. And one day, without planning it, you'll find yourself chasing another roar. Another place. Another moment that pulls you out of your routine and into something bigger. Because once you've felt that kind of power, you don't forget it. You look for it. In different forms. In different places. In different experiences. And that's how it begins. Not with a destination. But with a feeling. A feeling that somewhere out there, there's still something waiting to be discovered. Something that will challenge you. Move you. Change you. Just like that first moment. When you stood at the edge of the falls. Heart racing. Mist on your skin. The world opening in front of you. And you realized, This planet is not just a place you live in. It's a place you experience. So maybe the real question isn't, should you visit Iguazu Falls? Maybe the real question is, what are you waiting for? Because out there, beyond the ordinary, beyond the predictable, beyond everything you think you know, there's a roar. Still echoing. Still calling. Still waiting. And whether you answer it or not, it will always be there. Unstoppable. Unforgettable. Alive. Just like the moment you found yourself standing at the edge of something infinite. And for the first time in a long time, you weren't just existing. You were truly, deeply living. And in the end, it was never about the falls. Not really. It wasn't about the photos you took, or the places you checked off your list, or even the journey that brought you there. It was about a moment. A single, powerful moment, where everything stopped, where the noise of your life faded into the background, and all that remained was the sound of water. Crashing, endless, unstoppable. Because standing there, at Iguazu Falls, you didn't just see nature. You felt it. Raw. Wild. Uncontrolled. And somewhere in that chaos, you found clarity. You understood something most people spend their entire lives chasing. That life isn't about control. It isn't about perfection. It isn't about having everything figured out. It's about moments like this. Moments that shake you. Moments that humble you. Moments that remind you how vast this world truly is and how alive you are within it. The water keeps falling. It always will. Long after you've left. Long after your footprints have disappeared. Long after your voice has faded into memory. The roar continues. Unbothered. Unchanged. Eternal. But you carry something with you now. Something invisible. Something powerful. A memory that doesn't just sit in your mind, but moves through you. And maybe, years from now, you won't remember every detail. You won't remember the exact path you walked, or the exact words you spoke, but you will remember how it felt. That feeling of standing at the edge of something bigger than yourself, and realizing you're part of it. So wherever you go next, whatever path you choose, whatever life throws your way, remember this. There was a moment when you stood in front of something unstoppable, and instead of feeling small, you felt infinite. Because in a world that never stops moving, you found a place that made you pause. And in that pause, you found yourself. And that is something that never fades.